Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alastair.
And I'm Nick.
And in today's episode, we will be binging on Class A drugs and then attacking hikers in Cocaine Bear, and then hunting a deranged serial killer in Luther, the Fallen Sun. But before all of that, Nick, do you have something to recommend to our listeners?
Yes, I have been listening to some new music by a band we have discussed on here before. It is, of course, Sleaford Mods with their new album UK Grim, which came out as of this recording yesterday. So this is a controversial attempt to have a fairly early impression of this album, as I haven't had time to listen to it the usual 97 times I do before I actually form a concrete opinion of these things. But yeah, I've listened to UK Grim a few times because there weren't many podcasts out yesterday. And yeah, it's an interesting one from Sleaford Mods, if only because there's quite a few songs that are a bit more sort of light on the actual music, and to be honest sound a bit more like Jason Williamson just doing spoken word with a sort of gentle backbeat, which is quite fun, to be honest. I think it definitely provides a bit of variety to the album. I don't know whether these songs will have a huge afterlife at like parties or as just a fun backing track to you doing your work, but it's an interesting new vibe to the Sleaford Mods, I don't know, the monolith. I think perhaps inevitably, and like all bands do as they go on, the mods are getting a bit less raw and shouty than they used to be at the beginning, so maybe they do need to find some new tricks to sustain them, and they can't just rely on pure anger to keep them going. Not that I don't sound angry, but in a slightly less sort of loud, shouty fashion.
Yeah, I listened to this when it came out yesterday. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Sleaford Mods and yeah, enjoy all their stuff. I mean, each album of theirs, I think, does have a distinct sound. They clearly think about each one. I mean, there's a sort of Sleaford Mods overall approach, which is the usually minimalistic post-punk riffs with, shouting over the top and then variations on that. But this one, I think, there's similar to the last album, there's more, slightly more electronic sounds coming in. And some of this one I felt, was very sort of stripped back and quite raw, similar to what you were saying, that some of the beats are quite minimalist. There's a lot of good ones on there, especially liked I Claudius, one of the album tracks that I thought was particularly good and had some beautifully dark turns of phrases on it. Yeah, and there's what's a DIY.
Yeah, I thought that was fun.
Yeah, that was good. Having a go at the ongoing post-punk scene, basically having a go at all the other acts that I basically like and listen to.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just not offended by it because I'm not a musician on the post-punk scene, but I always find seemingly the one song they always seem to do on most of their albums now, where they complain about other musicians, quite entertaining.
Yeah.
And they've got Florence Shaw from Dry Cleaning on one of the singles, Force 10 from Navarone, which is pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, the advanced singles obviously are good as well. There's the title track, UK Grim, and also, they just released So Trendy, featuring that guy from James Addiction, who I can't remember.
Perry Farrell.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. So, those are good. But, I mean, I've listened to those beforehand. Yeah, the ones that are, new from the album that I'm really enjoying. Yeah, I Claudius, DIY. There's quite a lot of political ones, obviously a very political band. Right-wing beats.
Yeah, I liked that one. That was one of those ones where he actually does quite a lot of singing, which is always fun.
Yeah. So they're incorporating more and more into the music. Rhythms of Class, the final track, is quite good. And Tory Kong as well. They're all political ones, yeah.
Oh, Tory Kong was just strange. He was making a lot of random noises on that song.
Yeah. Again, it's angry and political, but in that sort of slightly esoteric way that you're not entirely sure what Sleaford's Mod song is actually about, although it's kind of about a lot of things, because there's a lot of quite oblique references to whatever the subject of the song is.
I mean, that's what makes it kind of fun. He's good as a spoken word artist. He's quite good at sort of conjuring up imagery in a handful of words and not necessarily needing to get very specific about it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So overall it's, pretty good first impression for an album. Definitely been enjoying it. We'll need a few more listens before I can really get my hands on it. But yeah, so far it's made a good impression.
Yeah, no, I'm enjoying it as a thing to sit and listen to. I don't know if it's going to be quite as good as a thing to sort of put on in the background and bop along to, but I guess we'll have to wait and see.
I really enjoyed the last album, Spare Rib. I thought that was very, very good. So, and the one before that was Eaten Alive, also strong. I mean, this is their 7th original album, plus there's compilation and remix albums as well. I mean,
I don't fully understand the Sleaford Mods history. I gather there's a few albums that happened before the ones that are on Spotify, but
yeah, there's lots of random bits and pieces. Yeah, they put out a lot of stuff, and the last two before this one were very, very good. So even if this one over time, I feel like it's not quite as good as Spare Rib, it doesn't mean that it's not also very good.
I think it's not quite as punchy, but I think there's some good wordplay going on. It may well grow on me. I think I saw that they I think probably Jason Williamson, but whoever does their social media, was referring to it on various platforms as a grower, not a shower. So
Yeah.
we'll see if he's right about that.
Yeah, slightly more avant-garde, I guess, in how minimalist the beats, that it's sort of stripped down to are. And I mean, obviously, yeah, they've got that political edge. I mean, the album is called UK Grim, which kind of sums everything up right about now.
Well, yeah, if you do just want, a loud banging track where he yells about how shit everything is, the title track is definitely going to provide that for you.
Yeah. It's a good year for Sleaford Mods fans.
Yeah, no, it's good to have them back. And as you say, it's good that they seem to make an effort to make every album unique. It's very much what I like from bands. The number one thing I tend to complain about bands, as Alastair will have heard me do many times, is bands who just seem to put out the same album every couple of years.
I mean, it depends. If it's a band you really, really like, then I guess,
It's still annoying.
It's still annoying. You prefer them to do new things, but yeah, I guess it's measured by the tempo of how much you like what it is that they do. But you want artists to be challenged themselves and putting out, new material that's distinctive and interesting. I mean, the bands that do kind of the same album over and over, it just serves to reinforce that their glory years are behind them. Whereas the bands that are trying new stuff obviously means they, are searching for possibly future glory.
Yeah, it's true. Obviously, the first band I ever really got into was Blur, and say what you will about Blur, and some of those albums are better than others, but I did always enjoy the fact that when Blur did an album, there was always a sense of, okay, what's it going to be this time, lads? What have you done to yourselves now?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you want. I mean, I'm not going to name names of artists that I feel just are re-releasing the Glory Years albums over and over, but you want some sense of, trying something new.
Yes, exactly, and Sleaford Mods do at least always give it a crack. So, anyway, that's what I've been listening to. Alastair, what have you done?
Well, I have been attempting to watch the Best Picture and otherwise Oscar-nominated films.
Of course, it's that time again.
It's the time of the year again where we lay out some predictions as per the last 2 years. We're recording on a Saturday. The ceremony is tomorrow, or technically very early Monday morning UK time. And when this drops on Thursday, you'll know how much of this is right or not.
Because I'll have put some annoying honking noises behind it.
Yeah, always love the honking noises. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting field this year. Overall, quite a strong field without any real obvious front runners. There's all sorts of different directions this could go in, or they could just sort of scatter the prizes liberally between several of the films. Like last year, my favourite film amongst the Best Picture nominees is my favourite film of last year. Long-term listeners of the podcast will know that both of us really liked Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I'd be very happy if it was showered with awards. Possibly too close to being science fiction for stuffy, serious Academy members to shower with praise. But you never know, this could be the exception that breaks the rule. So yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed Everything Everywhere All at Once, so I hope that does well. I really liked Tar, thought that was very tense. Had really, really strong atmosphere. Yeah, quite interesting story. Woman Talking was quite interesting. Probably would have worked better as a play, I felt. But it was certainly very well acted and has a great cast. I also think, talked previously in this podcast about All Quiet on the Western Front and how good I thought that was. So if any of them get the top prize, I'd be happy. Avatar and Top Gun nominated as well. I think the Academy said they want to nominate more popular films for the big gongs. I'd be surprised if Avatar or Top Gun win Best Picture. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think the Best Picture will be either Everything Everywhere All at Once or Tar, hoping that the ones I liked are the best ones. This could be a Spielberg year. Yeah, he was nominated a lot last year for West Side Story. He's nominated a lot again for The Fabelmans this year. So yeah, and I'm sure at least once in Spielberg's remaining career, I mean, the guy's pretty old now, but he's still churning out films. There's going to be at least one more year when he absolutely sweeps the Oscars. This self-mythologizing story of himself could be the year that does that. I'm going to tip for Best Actress, Michelle Yeoh. Again, lots of good buzz. She's had a great career, but this is, I think, her first actual lead in a film, which is crazy, despite her long career, or film in the English language. Best Actor, Colin Farrell. I'm tipping for Banshees of Inisherin.
Yeah, I hope Banshees of Inisherin sweeps it, just purely because I liked it. I have no idea how it stacks up in terms of Hollywood politics.
Everyone's been talking so much about the performances and things like that and how great they are and how great everyone in it is. I don't think it's quite firing on all cylinders enough to win the top prize Best Picture or maybe Best Director. But what I've done is in all the categories that a cast member of Banshees of Inisherin is nominated, I'm going to tip them. So I think Best Actor, Colin Farrell. Best Supporting Actress, Kerry Condon. Best Supporting Actor, Brendan Gleeson. So yeah, Banshees of Inisherin's going to take a fair amount of the acting prizes. Best Director, either the Daniels for Everything Everywhere All at Once or Spielberg again. Best Foreign Language Film, that's probably a lock on All Quiet on the Western Front, as it's nominated in other categories. And yeah, probably Avatar to do well in all the technical categories, effects and editing and things like that.
Okay. Think Banshees could win Best Screenplay?
Yeah, probably as well, actually. There's some actually really great writing there. So yeah, that's a possibility, yeah. I'm not sure who's nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. I didn't actually dig that far down.
All Quiet on the Western Front, Glass Onion for some reason, Living, Top Gun, and Women Talking.
Yeah, Women Talking, I suppose, is, again, it's a great bit of writing, possibly for Best Adapted Screenplay. It's based on a novel, I believe. I was surprised when the end credits roll they didn't say based on the play, but it does feel a little bit like a play they've pointed a camera at, but fair enough.
Glass Onion, is that an adapted screenplay because it's based on the first one?
Yeah, that I don't understand. I guess it's not adapted because it's not based on the Beatles song, but surely every sequel can't be based on a...
Well, I mean, Top Gun Maverick is nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay as well, so maybe it is. I don't really know. I don't understand the workings of the Hollywood heart.
There aren't many sequels that get nominated for this sort of thing, so it's difficult to tell. Borat had both of its films nominated for Best Writing, I think, but I don't know if the second one was Best Adapted or Original Screenplay. I suppose Borat, in either way, is based on a character that existed in sketch comedy shows, so it is adapted, I suppose, in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, there's, I think, only two films that both the original and the sequel have both been nominated for the Best Screenplay Oscar, and that's The Godfather and Borat, so there's some good trivia.
Top Gun didn't make it then.
I don't think the original Top Gun was nominated for much. Obviously, it was one of the biggest hits of the time, made Tom Cruise's career and has a long-lasting cultural legacy, certainly to anyone who plays slow-motion volleyball or wants to fly jets. Yeah, I mean, for the record, Top Gun Maverick was entertaining blockbuster. I did roll my eyes a bit when they were like, really? Top Gun sequel 40 years after the original? But yeah, Tom Cruise does good action blockbuster. It's got bombast. It's all propaganda for the American military, but it is a good 2-hour thriller with lots of cool jet scenes and volleyball scenes.
Yeah, no, I know. Top Gun Maverick, it's better than you'd think. Maybe one day I'll watch it.
Yeah, and obviously I'm on the record with saying how much I didn't like Avatar: The Way of Water. I'd be very surprised if James Cameron gets a whole load of prizes for his rather wet film, but stranger things have happened.
He's only nominated for Best Picture, isn't he? He's not nominated for that much outside of technical stuff.
Yeah, I haven't really drilled down into all the technical categories like sound editing and things like that, but to be fair, All Quiet on the Western Front had brilliant editing, sound editing, things like that. So did Everything Everywhere All at Once. There is more competition in the technical categories than there usually is. Sometimes it's just there's one clearly big historic or action epic or something like that that's crept into the top categories that basically probably won't win the big prizes but will dominate the downslate stuff.
But no superheroes this year.
No superheroes this year.
It wasn't the greatest year in superhero movies, and the Spider-Verse sequel got delayed, so...
So yeah, well, I mean, that's got to be a shoo-in for animated feature.
Actually, I stand corrected, the Batman does get a Best Visual Effects nod.
Yeah. It did look very, very good. They managed to capture the Victorian Gothicness of it all very well.
Oh, and actually Angela Bassett got nominated for Wakanda Forever, so really I'm just talking shit.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that, yeah. And she was very good in that film. I mean, and she is a Hollywood grandee at this point, so there's a possibility that, yeah, she might win for that, partly on the basis of, does she have an Oscar, or she doesn't have as many as she should, either way?
I don't know how many Oscars she has, but yeah, some good people in that category. There's 2 cast members from Everything Everywhere All at Once. But your current pick for that is Kerry Condon.
I'm going to lean into the Banshees of Inisherin. I mean, maybe this year I'm biased towards the films that I liked rather than the films that I think other people, specifically the American Academy of the Arts and Sciences, will vote for their best performances of the year. But I thought it was great, and I've generally heard universal acclaim for the acting in those films. So yeah, I think I'm going to say we're nominated. Banshees of Inisherin is going to do well for acting prizes. I thought no one's nominated from that film for Best Actress, so I do hope Michelle Yeoh gets a gong. She did win, I think, the Screen Actors Guild Prize this year, so...
It looks like it'll probably be her or Cate Blanchett, but who knows.
I mean, if Cate Blanchett, she's already got, I think, she's definitely got one Oscar for Blue Jasmine and possibly another. And Tar is a great film and a great performance, so it wouldn't be, too disappointing if Cate Blanchett did win it, but I'd like to see Michelle Yeoh take it home.
There we go, and by now, you'll already know if Alastair was right, thanks to the magic of sound editing.
Yes. Hopefully, one day you'll get an award for your sound editing.
Yes, this is definitely the best podcast editing on the internet, guys. Except no substitutes. Stop listening to Off Menu.
I don't think I've ever listened to Off Menu.
Same. Okay, and first up, and after this, is it even worth covering any more films this year? It's Cocaine Bear, the American comedy horror film directed by Elizabeth Banks, recently released to much acclaim. well, the trailer was released to much acclaim anyway. This is, of course, a knowing B-movie about a bear on cocaine. The conflict is between the bear, who wants more cocaine after a bunch of packages of it were dropped over his forest by a drug dealer fucking up in the sky. And now, yes, the bear wants the cocaine. The other drug dealers, who are the colleagues of the idiot who drops the cocaine on the forest, want to get the cocaine back so they can sell it. And there's some unlucky randos who are caught between a crazed bear and some angry drug dealers. Violence ensues. We have seen this film. Alastair, what did you think?
I mean, it's very much you pay your money and you get your cocaine bear. I mean, that's what you get. You know, if you want a tight hour and a half of a cocaine-addled psychotic bear attacking people, some of which you really want to see get got by a cocaine bear and some of which you don't want to see get got by a cocaine bear, then that's pretty much like it. It is quite funny. It has got lots of gore. It's very silly. It knows, as you say, it's a knowing B movie. It knows what it's doing. You know, anyone who says like they feel gypped or whatever from this film, or that it didn't live up to what was offered, is, I don't know, probably should think long and hard, because it's called Cocaine Bear and you get Cocaine Bear. If I had to criticize it, I think like, although it was quite funny, it wasn't like kind of fall out of my seat, like rolling on the floor, like laughter, you know, but it was pretty entertaining.
Yeah, I think they've restrained themselves from going, full hog on it and making it ridiculous or silly. They've played it comparatively straight, apart from the fact that a lot of the characters are sort of broad caricatures. A lot of the criminals are written through this lens of being, I don't know, sort of vaguely reminds you of possibly some Coen Brothers movie. Obviously, this is not as good as a Coen Brothers movie, but the criminals are these bickering idiots who can't do anything without being distracted by banality, such as their grief, or one of them seems to be constantly furious because he's been stabbed early in the movie and it's ruined his sweater.
Yeah, they've all got like a sort of little eccentricity, which is very much, like you say, a Coen Brothers thing.
Yeah, and again, that makes it vaguely entertaining. It makes them seem, maybe three-dimensional is a strong word, but it makes them seem like personalities, so you maybe feel something when the cocaine bear comes for them. As Alastair says, either, oh no, it's a shame that person got by a bear, or yes, bear, get him. Yeah, and the cast is pretty good. The narrative smashes along at a good speed. The kills come regularly enough to stop you getting bored. Again, as Alastair said, a tidy 90 minutes in length. So just as you start to think, okay, I think I get the point now. Is this going to end soon? It more or less ends.
Yeah, I think what sort of works about it is that sort of the humour is not kind of in like Sharknado territory, that, or even like kind of silly as like Snakes on a Plane was. Like, it kind of says just enough the side of believability to be not totally sort of out of control wackiness. I mean, bizarrely, this is based on a true story. I believe the true story was that some drugs were dropped from a plane into the forest and someone found a dead bear that had eaten a lot of cocaine. I don't think the bear ever attacked anyone, but you never know. So, but yeah, I guess it's, this side of totally mad. Even like the early Sharknado films were just like really, really silly from start to finish, where this is like quite silly, but also still kind of hanging on to those sort of like horror movie credentials to some degree.
Yeah, it's quite controlled in a lot of ways. It sort of moves along quite slowly. The bear is there fairly regularly from the beginning, but it's not like constantly on screen. You don't get the chance to get sick of the bear. There's at least some restraint in their deployment of the Cocaine Bear. By the time we get to Cocaine Bear 3, then it'll probably be non-stop bear from start to finish, and the whole thing will have become ridiculous. And to be honest, I don't know if I'd bother seeing Cocaine Bear 3. But in Cocaine Bear 1, there is a sensible deployment of Cocaine Bear.
Yeah, there's like lots of, as you say, like humour between the various different like slightly eccentric characters.
Yeah, there's a faction of drug dealers who are, as I say, mostly sort of slightly Coen Brothers-y idiots. There's the people who sort of hang around in the park just because, who are sort of a different species of eccentric. There's a ranger played by Margot Martindale, who is always reliable and is indeed fun here. Her character is, again, pretty ridiculous and kind of awful in a way that keeps you entertained when she's on screen. And then there's Kerry Russell as an all-American mom whose kids have run away into the park, who is the one playing the more or less straight part, the main one who you think, okay, I would be sad if they died, because they are harmless enough innocents who have a nice-ish line in sort of snarky parent-child banter, but aren't, awful.
Yeah, and bizarrely in terms of casting, this is Ray Liotta's last on-screen performance, I believe. I guess going out on a high, he plays the big villain. Obviously, yeah, he does sort of nasty gangster quite well. Interesting that a man who's had like pretty varied career from everything, including obviously heights of like Goodfellas and things like that, to sadly passing away towards the end of last year. I especially enjoyed him as the big villain in the third season of Hannah, which was one of his last on-screen performances. But yeah, strange that his last film is Cocaine Bear, but I think he can be pleased of the work he did doing the villain in this.
Yeah, no, like all the criminals in this, he's a bit sort of exaggeratedly eccentric rather than like full bore terrifying and evil. But yeah, it works fine. He's still got enough sort of edge and anger to him, coming mostly from I think Ray Liotta's performance to make him work as a villain.
Yeah. You know, and there's like a sort of smashing, of other people who are good. There's the Norwegian character who was one of the prominent people in Game of Thrones. His name's Norwegian, and it's going to be almost impossible to pronounce. Christopher Hiju, I want to go with. Again, he's just this quite silly turn as one of the first victims of the bear. Yeah, they've got a good cast, I feel, of recognisable faces, people you've seen in things.
Well, yeah, as I say, Kerry Russell is one of the leads, and it's good to see her back in an 80s set production, as she is, of course, also the co-lead of The Americans, which I watched all of last year. And her fellow co-lead from that show, and her real-life husband, Matthew Rhys, shows up in a small cameo at the beginning. I guess nice nostalgia for them to be back together in an 80s set production.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things, we haven't discussed so far, that actually this is technically a period piece as well. I suppose it's based on a true story, but yeah, I quite liked how they brought the 80s into it in a not so, like, over-the-top way. I think when we discussed like Wonder Woman 1984, we said they fall into the pit that a lot of productions do when they do like period pieces, especially like recent history. Like that begins with this long shot going through a mall where it's like every single shop and every single person is like decked out in 80s fashion and it just screams 80s at you. But that never happened. There was never any like shopping mall where everyone was dressed in up-to-date clothing. There have been loads of people wandering around in stuff from 5-10 years ago. Even people dressing like the 50s still, like older people. That doesn't happen. But here they've done it sort of more subtly, bringing in the things. I mean, yeah, there's like bits of fashion, like the cars, obviously like 80s cars. I kind of like how they added this little like sort of synth bit to the soundtrack that sounds like quite 80s, but not in a really obvious way, but does really remind you of, well, films like Top Gun and stuff that lent heavily into the synth and guitar based score. So actually, yeah, if anything's subtle about Cocaine Bear, it's how they bring in the 80s into it.
Well, yeah, like Kerry Russell's wearing this sort of head-to-toe pink shellsuit tracksuit thing. But yeah, they don't absolutely hammer the 80s. There's not like constant best of the 80s hits on the soundtrack, which is probably for the best.
Yeah, I think there's only like one or two needle drops.
Again, possibly an example of them, going soft when they could have gone hard. But to be honest, the risk of going hard is you end up making a sort of smug, knowing, did you see we did the thing? Masterpiece like Sharknado or Snakes on a Plane, which gets quite tiresome over the course of an hour and a half, especially if you don't actually have anywhere to take it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the humour needs to be more than just, reference dropping, wink, wink, nudge, nudge sort of thing. I wasn't like sort of side-splittingly hilarious. I laughed a lot. I thought the density of jokes could have been much higher. But there were some very, very good bits. Possibly, I think the best bit was in the middle of the film. There was a huge comedy set piece in which they call an ambulance, and then the ambulance shows up into the middle of a Cocaine Bear massacre, and then the EMTs, whatever, get dragged into the Cocaine Bear massacre, and there's like even a chase.
A small car chase, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that whole sequence around the Rangers' hut, which was again with the Margot Martindale character and this other group of slightly pathetic small-time criminals who are hanging around her. Yeah, and then the EMTs turn up as well, and yes, that was extremely enjoyable. That was another good ridiculous bit.
Yeah, I think they went through all the horror movie tropes, like the bit when the bear's on the roof or whatever, and the bit when it's hiding out in the back and things, and then and it's one of those things where like each event kind of escalates the silliness and it gets more and more ridiculous, and to the point when I was just like, this is just so over the top. But as a set piece, that really worked. It's not necessarily, you can't necessarily sustain that level of ridiculousness and keep it believable, but I guess I wanted it to sustain that level of a humorous thing happening.
Yep, it has perhaps not quite the level of ludicrousness you might have been hoping for from the trailer, but it keeps a good level of comedy throughout. It is basically entertaining. It doesn't last too long. Yeah, there are worse things you could watch than Cocaine Bear.
It's interesting that this is done so well out of so little paid promotion. It's basically been like social media and word of mouth, partly through having like, ridiculous premise and a ridiculous trailer. Because the budget for this must have been probably smaller than like one episode of Game of Thrones or certainly Rings of Power, things like that. And they, it still had like, was half filling cinemas several weeks after it's been released. So they managed to, connect with an audience through not particularly massive star power, not particularly big advertising. So it goes to show that like, the B-list feature can still be done in the 21st century.
Yeah, you maybe have to lean into the meme factor a little bit, but you can do it. Okay, and lastly today, it's Luther, the Fallen Sun. This is, of course, the film follow-up to the successful BBC TV show, starring Idris Elba as the driven, intense detective John Luther, last seen being sent to prison at the end of Series 5, and at the start of this film, he is still there, although it has now been a mild retcon to reveal that part of the reason he was sent to prison was apparently due to the machinations of a serial killer played by Andy Serkis, who wanted Luther out of the way so he could embark on his complicated plan to blackmail people via the internet, send them to Norway, and then fuck them up in ways I probably shouldn't spoil in this intro. So, we have seen this film. We have also seen all of the original Luther show. Alastair, what did you think?
So I very much felt that this was a game of two halves. It's kind of just over 2 hours long, and the first hour I felt was kind of, oh, this is classic Luther, I'm enjoying this. It's dark, nasty, tense, serial killer drama, set in London. There's lots of like moody, grim shots of London, making it looking inhuman and hostile. There's a nasty serial killer with some awful plans, doing nasty things to people, and Luther's the only person who can take them down. This is what we like about this show, or now in film. Then the second half, it kind of all goes a bit James Bond, is I guess kind of the only way to put it. And it kind of loses the believability that I feel is a key part of the appeal of Luther. I mean, there's been some past great Luther stories like the Diceman one or the Killer Under the Bed, and they're like just a bit beyond reality to still be believable but also be a kind of intense fictional like crime drama thing, and they managed to walk that line of kind of believability and, I don't know, hyper reality. But this one just went too far into unbelievability in the second half. Bit of a misfire there.
Yeah, I guess you've got to increase the scale when you go to the movie, you know. This is why the in-betweeners keep going on holiday. But yeah, it did feel like they had, I've got the exact same thing in my notes, the weird crossover of Luther and James Bond. I mean, in fairness, I do think that possibly after 5 series, the old version of Luther had perhaps almost reached a point of diminishing returns, repeating its formula, and perhaps I see the appeal of trying to find a new take or a new angle or something different to do. But I'm not sure if this is the winning idea, or at the very least I'm not sure if this is the correct implementation of it. I also felt, to be honest, I felt like it started a bit shakily for me. I think I didn't quite fully get on board with it until Luther, and spoilers I guess, but surely you could guess this is going to happen. Luther leaves prison. I won't spoil how he leaves prison, but he does not spend the film in prison. And yeah, I felt like the film didn't fully get going for me until Luther had removed himself from prison. After that, yes, it felt like, classic Luther, Idris Elba, slogging around town, dealing with Andy Serkis, or at least trying to. And then it had its sort of Luthery charm. Idris Elba still got his wide-eyed intensity, his extreme captivating magnetism, which makes this character work. It gets a bit grim at times, but I guess if you're going to go big, you got to go big on everything, including the grimness. But yeah, eventually it goes a bit James Bond, and I'm not sure, as you say, the two halves fully merge. Also, I felt like the internet blackmail murders did perhaps fall foul of the old, Black Mirror trap. I didn't feel like they were quite interesting and novel enough a concept.
What I did like about those is you never find out exactly what he's got on anyone. The villain is the blackmail king. It's, again, something that's from a more, fantastical thriller series when, he's not as strong as Luther, and the villain's great power is that he can control anyone through discovering their worst secrets and blackmailing them. And you never find out what he's got on any particular character. And even at one point someone says, at the end of it, it wasn't even that bad. There is that element of, would you want your worst moments or most private things exposed to the world? And then once you start compromising yourself to stop that happening, you then kind of get in deeper. One of the characters is a corrupt cop. Obviously, once you start betraying other policemen and, going in with criminals, then he's got more dirt than you and things like that. But yeah, it was a bit, has Luther just wandered into a Black Mirror thing? I mean, they've done so many different killers and things like that over the years that at least this was sort of something slightly different.
Yeah, the Andy Serkis character felt like he fell a bit between his two stools of sort of creepy serial killer and James Bond villain. Like this rich guy with his Norway secret headquarters bunker thing doing this massive streaming production in a shiny suit. It felt a bit weird. It felt like it didn't really quite mesh with the usual creepy vibe. But it's vaguely interesting, sort of academically speaking, as a Luther viewer, to think, where are they going with this? What's the plan here? Is there a vision for the future of Luther, or are they just thinking, well, this is some fun, isn't it? We might never do another one. Yeah,
that's a good point. I mean, Idris Elba's star just goes higher and higher. And maybe, there's always a sense of every Luther, is this the last one? Surely, they can't do... He's officially no longer a policeman anymore. Finally, all the terrible things he's done have caught up with him.
I mean, they can always retcon it again, but they did theoretically resolve the Alice subplot in the previous TV series.
Yeah, I was waiting for the Alice cameo at some point, which I think that's in our review of the previous Luther season 5 or whatever, yeah, I think we were pleased that they resolved that.
My memory of old Luther series is a bit shaky, but they had him run off with Alice at the end of series 3, didn't they?
Yes, yeah. And then she's not in season 4.
She's not in season 4 because they couldn't get Ruth Wilson back, so they killed her off screen, and then brought her back again in series 5, and then killed her again.
I mean, it has been, I guess, heading in a sort of silly James Bond direction for a while when you put it like that. But
yeah, possibly that particular subplot has run its course more than once.
Yeah. I mean, and I take what you mean. They've got film budget now for Netflix. This was actually released in the cinema briefly before being dropped to Netflix. And there was definitely a temptation to go big. I mean, getting Andy Serkis in is a good coup. I kind of feel that, like, to be honest, based on what you said, a better film would have been if they'd taken a leaf out of the In-Betweeners book and done Luther Abroad. They should have set it in China or something like that and just wiped the slate clean. Just had, like, Luther's on the run in China from all the terrible things he's done and gets mixed up with the serial killer there. Rather than this one where they kind of, like, the first half is basically, could have been the regular BBC season 6 of Luther. The second half involves, this villain who has like an army of henchmen, hacking people, manipulating them, controlling all their electronic devices. This big underground bunker in Norway with piles and piles of dead bodies everywhere. And I was sitting there thinking, like, who are these people supposed to be? Like, who are these minions? I mean, it's sort of implied that Andy Serkis is sort of generically rich. I prefer that they leaned it's more like, he's like he's a tech billionaire with a sort of twisted army of cult-like followers stroke legions of henchmen he's paid off. And when you're sitting there wondering, they've lost the magic.
Oh yeah, Andy Serkis gets a lot of screen time in this, but I guess if you're going to get a big Hollywood actor, you might as well use him. But yeah, they don't really get into the character that much. He doesn't even get to do any like massive, ridiculous villain acting, which, I mean, I guess they don't want to make him a full-on Batman villain. But no. He kind of is a full-on Batman villain, so...
He does have a big speech at the end when he's like, before the sort of final confrontation, he does have like a big kind of villain monologue at one point about how he's been forced to hide his sadistic nature and now he's revealing it to the world. He does the classic villain thing, you're all just like me, it's just different circumstances or something like that, Again, it's something like a Bond villain might say or a Batman villain, so...
It was a decent enough speech, delivered well enough, Andy Serkis can act, etc. But it didn't feel like it was really contradicting anything because I didn't have that much of a sense of what he was like the rest of the time. I only really knew him as the guy who is a serial killer.
Yeah. And usually, again, with the other series of Luther, they spend more time building up the people as like, it's a classic serial killers, they're normal people. Like the last series, it was a surgeon. In previous series, they've been like business people or people completely on the fringes of society, dropped off the radar, but like they're just one guy living in like an abandoned house, kidnapping people. It's kept that level of like believability and understandability and like you could believe that brilliant cardiac surgeon is actually also like a deranged serial killer. That's what the kind of the strength that Luther's always played on, whereas this is as I said, just like a little bit too far. And again, when the audience is starting to ask questions like, I mean, there's various bits like these people are just sort of generically Russian for some reason. He's got like, maybe this is the effect of Putin's war in Ukraine, that now like we need like a lot of really nasty people to hang around with the villain. Like they can be Russian. I don't know, Andy Serkis isn't particularly Russian. They'll just be Russian. A lot of nasty Russian people.
Well, yeah, that's somehow where he's getting his labour or his money or something for his ridiculous offshore murder house. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things that, like, in a Timothy Dalton or even latter year Craig era Bond films, it probably would have been like fair enough, like Russian arms deal or whatever. But yeah, Luther, it's just it's even like a bit too silly for like early years Craig Bond. So yeah, let alone Luther, which is supposed to be believable or just a bit beyond believable.
Yeah. I was sort of academically a bit interested by this, but I don't know if I'd really recommend it to anyone who isn't, a Luther fan or a massive Idris Elba fan.
Yeah, I hopefully people don't start with this. Like,
it's not really a jumping on point, no.
No. Like, go back and watch the first season, and then watch the second season with the Diceman and all the absolute genius ones that they did.
Yeah, watch the first 3 series, and then stop and consider if you want to watch any more.
Yeah, I mean, Idris Elba is still brilliant, and he does the character so well. He's been doing it for so long. As soon as he puts on the jacket, I like the fact that wherever he's got a car stashed away to get away, he also has the classic Luther jacket in that car. Again, how many of these hidden cars does he have?
They are really going into the iconography of the jacket, aren't they? There was at least 2 or 3 moments in this film where there was a long sort of lingering pause for him to like don the jacket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then when you see Idris Elba wearing the jacket, you think like, he's great in this part. Again, he did the bit when he's standing on top of a skyscraper, like moodily staring at London, like I'm coming for you. sort of thing.
It's Batman.
It's Batman. I'm going to take on London. All that stuff is you think like, yeah, that's Luther. This is what we want. There's lots of good stuff to it, and certainly Idris Elba is sort of bringing his best to this, and he is, he's very good at what he does.
Yeah, no, it's the Idris Elba performance is fine. As I say, there's a sort of middle hour or so of this once he's out of prison and before he fucks off to Norway to play James Bond, where Idris Elba is sort of prowling around London looking wide-eyed and intense, and it's solid enough Luther. It's not their most inspiring villain, but it's solid enough Luther. Yeah. But unfortunately, it's a bit bookended by them trying slightly odd shit, but I'm not sure entirely works.
Yeah, I mean, Marvel do this all the time when they put the character in the position at the end of a film or whatever, and then they we want to do something different in the next one. Okay, so we need to spend the first 10 minutes sorting out the situation we left the character in.
Well, yeah.
I don't know if there'll be more Luther. We always say well, this is a point they could leave it at, but yeah, at least I guess we did get to see Idris Elba play a sort of James Bond.
Yeah, it's true. This may be the closest we ever come. So enjoy it while it lasts. It's okay-ish. I don't know. At the end of this episode, Cocaine Bear aims for the middle, more or less succeeds. Luther aims for something slightly more complicated and confusing and possibly doesn't quite work.
That's all we have time for. If you have enjoyed this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, then please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and whilst you're there, please leave us a review, as it helps other people find out about the show. You can also visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can find other podcast episodes, bonus audio content, and short written pieces by Nick and myself.
And if you want to find more from us, you can go on social media and follow us as at MFV Podcast on Twitter or Moderate Fantasy Violence on Facebook. You could also follow me personally as NickMB on Twitter, nickbryan.com on Instagram, and nickbryan.com again on the broader internet.
And you can follow me personally on Twitter, where I'm at Alastair J.R. Ball, and you can get more of my writing at redtrainblog.com. Join us in the next episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, where we will be trying to not get bitten by zombie fungus in The Last of Us, and then going live to the O2 with Alan Partridge Stratagem. Join us next time for both of those. Until then, have a good one, and goodbye.
Bye.
I'm all out of Cocaine Bear.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm crashing.
Yeah. Get ready for the Suicide Tuesday.
Is that what we're calling Luther the Fallen Sun?
Probably, yeah. I don't know. That's a cocaine reference. My mum listens to this podcast.
Is your mum likely to watch Cocaine Bear?
Who can say? I shall ask her.